Imagine a leader who once inspired hope, hailed as a savior, a symbol of strength. But behind the uniform and the charismatic speeches lurked a darkness that would turn a nation into a nightmare. This is the story of Idi Amin, a man who rose from humble beginnings to become Uganda's most feared ruler. His reign of terror left a trail of death, destruction, and paranoia, earning him the title, the Butcher of Uganda. How did a once trusted soldier transform into one of history's most brutal dictators? What drove his thirst for power and bloodshed? This is the chilling tale of a man whose rule would forever haunt Uganda and serve as a warning to the world. Welcome to Old Around the World, where historical stories are brought to life. Please subscribe. Idi Amin Dada was born in the 1920s in Kiboko, Uganda, to a Kakwa father and Lugbara mother. Raised in a humble background, Amin had little formal education but found his path in the military. He joined the King's African Rifles, KR, of the British Colonial Army in 1946 as a cook, but quickly rose through the ranks due to his physical strength, charisma, and brutal efficiency. His military prowess earned him a reputation, especially during Britain's colonial wars in Kenya and Somalia. By the 1950s, Amin had become one of the first native Ugandans to be promoted to sergeant and later commissioned as an officer. His loyalty to the British secured him further promotions, and he became deeply involved in suppressing rebellions, often using excessive force. His ruthlessness was evident in his brutal handling of the Turkana cattle raids in Kenya, where he was accused of severe human rights abuses. Despite these accusations, the British found him useful and continued to support his ascent. As Uganda gained independence from Britain in 1962, Amin became a key figure in the new Ugandan army under Prime Minister Milton Obote. His close alliance with Obote allowed him to rise to the position of deputy commander of the army. However, Amin's growing ambition and brutal tactics made him a dangerous figure in Ugandan politics, and it was only a matter of time before he set his sights on total power. By 1970, tensions between Idi Amin and President Milton Obote had reached a breaking point. Obote, wary of Amin's influence, attempted to sideline him. However, Amin had already built strong alliances within the military and was secretly planning to seize power. In January 1971, while Obote was attending a Commonwealth conference in Singapore, Amin launched a military coup. The takeover was swift and bloodless, and Amin declared himself president of Uganda. At first, many Ugandans welcomed Amin's rule, seeing him as a strong leader who could bring stability. He positioned himself as a populist, freeing political prisoners, increasing military salaries, and promising to return Uganda to its people. However, within months, his leadership took a dark turn as he began consolidating power through violence. He purged the army of Obote's supporters, executing thousands of soldiers and officials suspected of disloyalty. In 1972, Amin ordered the expulsion of Uganda's Asian community, accusing them of exploiting the economy. Over 60,000 Asians, many of whom were Ugandan citizens, were forced to leave, leading to economic collapse. Meanwhile, his secret police, the State Research Bureau, carried out mass executions of suspected enemies. Amin's rule quickly descended into a reign of terror, with an estimated 300,000 people murdered during his presidency. As Amin's grip on Uganda tightened, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He gave himself grandiose titles such as His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC, DSO, MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea. His obsession with power led to paranoia, and he saw betrayal everywhere. He frequently executed government officials and military officers, often based on unfounded rumors. Amin's brutality was not limited to his political enemies. His own inner circle was not safe. Several of his wives mysteriously disappeared, with reports of their bodies being dismembered and left in horrifying conditions. He also engaged in bizarre and theatrical acts, such as sending love letters to Queen Elizabeth II and declaring himself the King of Scotland. These erratic actions led many to believe he had descended into madness. Despite his growing instability, Amin managed to maintain international alliances for a time. He aligned himself with Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, Palestinian militant groups, and even received military support from the Soviet Union. However, his reckless policies, including extravagant military spending and economic mismanagement, left Uganda in ruins. His unchecked power and violence ensured that his downfall was only a matter of time. By 1978, Idi Amin's Uganda was in chaos. The economy had collapsed, opposition forces were growing, and his paranoia had intensified. In a desperate move to rally national support, he ordered an invasion of neighboring Tanzania, aiming to seize the Kagera region. However, this proved to be his biggest mistake. Tanzania, led by President Julius Nyerere, launched a counteroffensive, forming an alliance with Ugandan rebels. The Tanzanian forces, along with Ugandan exiles, quickly overwhelmed Amin's army, exposing its weaknesses. By April 1979, they reached Kampala, and Amin was forced to flee. His once loyal soldiers abandoned him, and his dictatorship came crashing down. Amin escaped first to Libya, then to Saudi Arabia, where he was granted asylum. Despite his crimes, he was never formally tried or punished for his brutal rule. Uganda, left in devastation, struggled to rebuild after his departure. The country faced years of instability, with various leaders attempting to restore order. Amin's rule left deep scars, with families still searching for loved ones who disappeared under his regime. While he lived out the rest of his days in Saudi Arabia, his legacy remained one of terror, economic collapse, and an unthinkable loss of life. Idi Amin lived in exile in Saudi Arabia until his death in 2003. Despite his brutal reign, he remained unrepentant, claiming that he had ruled Uganda well. His death marked the end of one of Africa's most infamous dictators, but the impact of his rule was felt long after. Survivors of his regime continued to recount horrifying stories of torture, executions, and disappearances. The scars of his dictatorship lingered in Uganda's history, shaping its political and social landscape. Many Ugandans, especially the younger generation, have worked to move beyond the terror of Amin's rule. The country has since undergone political and economic reforms, though challenges remain. Leaders after Amin struggled to unify the nation, but his reign served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. His former torture chambers and execution sites now stand as memorials to remind the world of his atrocities. Despite attempts by some to rehabilitate his image, Idi Amin remains one of history's most notorious tyrants. His name is synonymous with cruelty, paranoia, and the destruction of a nation. His rule serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences of dictatorship and the resilience of a people determined to reclaim their country's future. Idi Amin's rule remains one of the darkest chapters in African history, a stark reminder of how absolute power can lead to unimaginable suffering. His dictatorship left Uganda in ruins, but the resilience of its people has proven that even the worst oppression can be overcome. However, the lessons of history must not be forgotten. Authoritarianism, corruption, and human rights abuses still exist in different parts of the world today. The best way to prevent history from repeating itself is through education, awareness, and accountability. By studying the past, we empower ourselves to recognize the warning signs of tyranny and stand against oppression before it takes root. If this story moved you, share it with others. Let the world remember the victims, honor the survivors, and ensure that leaders like Idi Amin are never allowed to rise again. History is not just about the past, it shapes our future. The question is, what will we do with the lessons it teaches us? Please subscribe, like, comment for more. Bye, history lover.